I get a lot of questions from people about the best way to go about writing legends, and so I decided to do this series where I help teach you guys some of my advice and tips on how to create better legends and what to do when writing them, because I love writing. I'm a storyteller, guys. That's what I love to do. But if there's one question I get asked a lot, and I do mean that this is something that comes up a bunch whenever I talk about legends or whenever people want to ask about them, people always ask me, how do I come up with a name for my character? I'm not good at coming up with names. And surprisingly, this isn't a unusual complaint I've gotten. I've had a lot of people say, how do you come up with names? What's a good name for my character? How do I come up with a name that I feel is good? Do I need a name that has a meaning to it? Stuff like that. So today what I want to do is I kind of want to walk you guys through some tips that will help you come up with a name for your character. Please keep in mind a few things. First of all, this isn't an exact science. There's no specific rule on how you should name your character. And I'm not saying that names aren't important. I would never recommend just use a random name generator. That's not a good idea. You need a name that will truly represent your character. And there are ways you can approach it. I'm going to give you some general advice today for naming, and then I'm going to give you some faction-specific advice. So here's how this is going to work. I'm going to start by giving you three tips that will help you craft a name in general. And then I will go through each faction in For Honor and give you specific advice for how to name someone from that faction, okay? So let's get started. Okay, number one, first thing that I would say, names don't need to have meaning, but it's not a bad idea either. Usually what you want is a name that you think will suit a character. This can be based on appearance or based on their story arc. For example, Richard Blackthorn doesn't have any significant meaning. I name my Lawbringer that to reference Richard the Lionheart and John Blackthorn from Shogun. That's it. Your names don't need to be overcomplicated. If you're overcomplicating your name, you're already doing it wrong. Don't think too hard on it. You know, names shouldn't be too difficult, which leads into my second piece of advice. Avoid long, complicated names. I don't care if you think they sound neat, but names like Wolfschigil Stein Hausengerdorf. Yes, it's a real name. I looked it up. I was looking up the longest names in the world. This one came up. It's a massive name. But it's going to be way too long for your character. It's way too complex. No one will remember it. No one will say it. Simple names that people will remember easily are best. If your character has a longer name, shortening it or giving them a nickname isn't a bad idea. Like, instead of saying Midoriya, you say Deku because he has a nickname. You want your audience to be able to use the name easily without having to reread the story to figure out how to say it right. And some of you might think that Japanese names are an exception because a lot of Japanese names are pretty dang long. But just look at some of the most popular anime out there and consider the names you see. Goku, Luffy, Naruto, Ichigo, Deku, Guts. Note how most of these names don't break 3 syllables. That's a good safe number to reach. If your character's name takes more than 3 syllables to say, you might need to shorten it. You know, just keep it simple. And then third, and I can't stress this one enough, don't be cringe with your names. I swear. I've met people that I physically cringed at when I see what they've named their characters. They've named them stuff like Lightning, Shadow, Blade. For the love of God. Your parents didn't name you Shadow, you know? You want that to be your code name? Fine, but get a real one. There's nothing wrong with a title or an epithet, but just naming yourself, hey, how are you today? Hey, what's your name? I'm Bill. Oh, I'm Corbett. I'm Bill. Oh, I'm Shadow. Oh, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Jen. What's your name? I'm Blade. It just screams, hi, I'm an edgy middle school boy who wrote this when he needed to be paying attention in class. And I don't say that to be mean. I say this to save you some embarrassment. Please, 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 please. Take time to think about a name, but don't just go with, I'm going to name myself something edgy. You know, it's... Anyway, now as for some faction-specific advice. I'll go through each faction. Okay, so you ready for this? Let's go through each faction, and I'll give you some advice on naming them. Knights. Let's start with the Knights. Knight names are going to usually be Latin, or at least founded in a Romance language, or a biblical language. So French, Spanish, Italian, English, even German will be acceptable. The meaning of the name isn't going to matter as much with this faction, but you can make connections. It's also very common to have a character named after someone important or after a family member. Biblical names like Gabriel, Isaiah, Thomas, Ezekiel, and other such names will be useful, and you might find it helpful to look up names from the pre-modern era in Europe, as most will be very creative. Another bit of advice is to try looking up the root name of a modern name. Like many root names today Many names today have a root in medieval Europe. Like, for example, if you know someone named Max, how far back does that go? You could get to Maximus or Maximilian or Maxwell. You might end up finding a very interesting name for your knight. As for surnames, a surname isn't always required, but you can certainly add them, especially if your knight is from a noble family. If they aren't from a noble family, adding a title is helpful. In the medieval period, other times men who didn't have surnames were given a title that reflected their job or status, and this turned into a surname. So you could have Isaac the Blacksmith, and that might turn into Isaac Smith, or Joshua the Tanner might become Joshua Tanner. Also, keep in mind what character you're making. A black prior is almost certain to have a more biblical or holy name, as priors are a holy order. Peacekeepers, having joined out of desperation or running from broken homes, may have lost or changed their names. And plus, there are some that are a little bit more, I'd say class specific. Like, for example, many of the Warmonger builds seem to have demon names, so maybe you want to come up with a cool, creative demon name. So stuff like that will be relevant, and of course there's always the aspect of swapping in factions, like if a person born to the Knights or a person born to the Samurai join the Knights, or a person born to the Vikings join the Knights, they might still keep their name from when they were a Samurai or a Knight, or a Viking, so you want to keep that in mind. Vikings. Vikings are a bit trickier. They will have a Germanic, Scandinavian, Gaelic, or Norse root to their name. I highly recommend, this is just an easy out, I'll be honest. I highly recommend picking up Skyrim and reading the names of random NPCs to give an idea of what kind of naming conventions you want. Just word of advice, avoid using Ragnar too much unless you want to recite Ragnar the Red 100 times in your story. It's kind of sad that name's kind of been butchered, but whatever. You could go to the Poetic Edda and Prose Edda. They can help you there for inspiration. And when it comes to surnames, I honestly wouldn't worry too much about that when it comes to the Vikings. Quite often with Viking names, surnames are a recommendation but not a priority. Just remember, an easy way to give someone a surname in the Vikings is to find another name and end it with son or datir. Like, for example, Golderson means son of Golder, or Steinindottir means daughter of Steinen. You know, like you can basically give them a surname that just references who their parent is, and that's a very easy way to do it. Aside from surnames, you may want to give your Viking a title. They love those. And unlike the Knights, your surname can be way more metaphorical. Like a Knight title might be the Dragon Slayer, but a Viking title might be the Bear, the Mountain, the Great Wolf, the Fang, Stonefist. And these can tie into deeds that they've done or physical characteristics, like Ulfric One Eye, Reva Stonefist, whatever floats your boat. Samurai. Okay, this is going to be complicated. Samurai names require a bit of thought, and you might need to do some double checking, because most Japanese names do have meanings. First of all, in Asian naming conventions, the surname always comes first. I can't stress that enough. The surname always comes first. I've seen so many people who want to ask me about their Japanese character's name, and I look at it and I go, which one is the surname? You need to make sure your surname comes first. In the name Oda Nobunaga, Oda is the surname, or Sei. Nobunaga is the given name, or Mei. This is because, in the Asian tradition, your clan or family matters. It's almost like saying that what family you're from, and you speak for and represent that family. So, for example, if my last name were Smith, I would say I am Smith Raven. I am of the Smith family, and I'm Raven of them. That's basically what you want to approach with that. That's how you want to think about that. Now, normally a surname in Japanese ties into something having to do with the family's roots, lineage, or goals. Now, here's the funny thing. The meaning of the last name won't matter too much unless the character you're talking about is the progenitor. Like, they're the ones who are starting the surname. And the reason why is because quite often in Japan, a surname sticks generations after the original founder of the generation. So, for example, I'll give you an example. Watanabe means crossing the bridge. So it's possible that this family was founded or has its roots near a river or bridge. However, let's say that later generations of the family move away from that bridge. The surname doesn't necessarily change. My surname, IRL, means Raven. And now I don't know why my surname is that. I think it has to do with a biblical connection. That's what's on our family crest. But just because I've moved away, or just because someone later in my line decides not to be Christian, it doesn't change the surname. You know what I'm saying? So the surname the meaning of the surname doesn't necessarily have to matter to your character unless they are the progenitor of the surname, in which case maybe they designed the surname themselves, having to do with something. So Just that. As for given names, Japanese names usually have a significant meaning, usually consisting of a kanji. Female names will usually denote beauty or grace in their names, and you might see a kanji that ends in something like ko, which means child, mi, which means beauty, ka, which means flower, or na. For example, you can use the name Hitomi, Hitomi. Hitomi can have various meanings. If it's just the kanji for Hitomi, that can mean pupil of the eye. So maybe you named her Hitomi because she's the apple of your eye. But by using two distinct kanji, one for history and mi for beauty, this can create meanings such as historical beauty or nobility or humane. Meanwhile, male names will emphasize something strong or brave. For example, Sakura is a female name. It means cherry blossom, so it's a very popular fitting girl's name. Meanwhile, Takeo carries a lot of masculine meaning to it, as if using the right kanji can mean military man or fierce masculinity. So, for example, if I were to make a Kyoshin, his surname could be something simple. His family or clan were founded on top of a mountain and were known for keeping and defending a shrine. So perhaps they took the name Murakami, which means village above or divine village. Then for a given name, let's say that when he was born, his mother laughed with joy, so maybe his name could be Shoyu, which has a character for laughter. My best advice when doing Japanese names is to read some kanji and naming conventions. Try combining two kanji to see what kind of meanings they can create. Then once you have a name you think you'll like, look up the name online to see if it's a common name or if someone else has it. If no one has this name, it might not be a common or conventional name. And also, don't be afraid to use pop culture and media. Some Japanese parents have no trouble naming their children after important or popular figures. So don't be too afraid of that. The Wulen. All right. Chinese names. All right, so this will require some breaking down. Chinese names will behave very similarly to Japanese names in terms of structure, with the surname coming before the given name. And like in the Japanese tradition, it usually is passed on from father to children. Most surnames in Chinese will be single syllables and often will connect with the founding father did, or where they're from, or what their position in society was. If you need to make it easy for yourself, the 10 most common surnames today in China are Wang, Li, Zhang, Liu, Chen, Yang, Huang, Zhao, Wu, and Zhou. There are many more than those. I would recommend looking through a list, but those are the 10 most common. Now, given names are a bit more tricky. Most Chinese full names are about 3 to 4 characters in length. 4 usually only happens if the surname is a compound surname like Shangguan, but I digress. There are a few ways you can go about designing a name. One way that goes back to ancient Chinese tradition is to use a genealogy model. What they would do is that you would have a surname, and then you would go down, you would create a saying or poem or song that the family held on to. Like maybe you had this really important poem or saying. And what they would do is they would take the first character, the first Chinese character of that poem or saying, and attach it as part of the given name. Then the next generation would take the second character. Then the third generation would take the third character, and all the way down the list until you had to redo it. The reason they did this was not only was it an easy way of doing genealogical naming convention, but it also showed respect to seniority, to your founders, to your elders. That's a very important thing in Chinese culture. So let's do it ourselves. So John 3:16. John 3:16 is a Bible verse. These are the characters for John 3:16 in Chinese. These are the characters. So let's say that I make a Nuxia from the family of Wu. So her surname is Wu. And she is the second generation of this family. She is the second born person in this family. The second character is I. So her name will be Wu something I, or Wu I something. Now, this isn't too commonly done nowadays, but it is still recognized and is a way to show family respect and seniority in the family. Another way that I've heard some people do it is they involve a character from the 5 elements in Chinese tradition: fire, wood, metal, water, and earth, and try to add that to the desired name. But you don't need to do that. That's just another way I've heard it. Finally, you're probably wondering, okay, so we've added a character from this saying, or we've added a character from the 5 elements. What else? What's next? Okay, this will be the time where you give the name a tie-in to a desire for the individual or aspiration. A lot of parents in Chinese culture want to give their baby a name that lives up to their aspirations for them. So for example, let's say that we have that news show we were talking about. So we have Wu I something or Wu something I, right? Okay, so now we know that we have our surname, we have our character from the genealogical phrase, Now we need a name that we want to apply to them. So let's say that the parents of this new show want her to grow up to be as beautiful as precious jade. Like they want her to be a beautiful jade stone, because jade is very popular in China. That word would be Lin. So let's add that character for Lin into the name. We'll add it at the end, so it'll be Wu Ai Lin. We can add this to get the name Wu Ai Lin. And you will really, I mean this, really need to do some deep reading and research on Chinese names to do this. And I would definitely say once you've created a Chinese name, take the time to type in the name on Google or something and look up to see if anyone else has the name. It doesn't mean that you can't use it as a name, but it may mean that the name isn't as common and you may need to do some tweaking. There's no shame in using websites or YouTubes to help you do this. I am not 100% fluent in Chinese or Japanese. Please take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. What you want to do is you want to make sure that you are doing your own research as well. And then finally, the Outlanders. The Outlanders, you know what, guys? This is your moment where you can try to prove me wrong on something. I am thinking right now that the majority of you don't actually want to create Outlander characters, and many of you don't actually care. This is the part of the video where you were planning on skipping and not really listening to because you don't like the Outlanders. Prove me wrong. Type in the comments that you want me to do a second video where I teach you how to make Outlander names, where I teach you how to make a name for a pirate, a Medjai, an Aphira, an Ocelot, and a Hatun. Hit me up in the comments section. Let me know if you actually want me to make that video or not, because I have a sneaky suspicion y'all don't actually like the Outlanders and you won't be making any characters for them. Prove me wrong. This is your chance. Hit me up in the comments. But you just have to prove me wrong for that. But I'm going to stop there because this video has gone on for a while. All right, so final points. Get creative with your names. Have fun making your names. Don't treat it as a chore. Treat it as learning something more about your character, because that's what you're doing. You're learning more about your character. That's the point here. That's what we're doing. That's the aim. So make it a fun experience. Have fun really playing with naming conventions. But please don't do this, guys. I swear, please don't do this. Don't come to me and say, what do you think of this name? Don't do that. And I'll tell you why I don't do that. Not only is it kind of annoying because I'm not the one to be the final judge. You're the creator. You be the final judge of your character's name. But second, it's not going to matter what I say. It really isn't going to matter. It's your character. Make your character the way you want to make them. The name should have significance to you and your character. You need to have a relationship with your character where you say, this name fits you, and I want it to be your name. At that point, it doesn't matter what I say. It is your character. And of course, the argument is, but what if no one else likes my character? It's your legend. There are people who don't like all my Legends videos. There are people who don't. You know, there are people who still haven't watched my Pirate video just because they don't like Pirate. Do you think they care what I named her? It's Pirate. No, I don't like Pirate. I'm not going to watch it. At the end of the day, you need to make sure that your relationship to your character is strong enough that when you make a name for that character, it fits them. Don't come to me and say, hey, Raven, do you like this name for my character? Because I'm going to say, do you like it? Yes, then good. That's what's going to matter at the end of the day. I can tell you it's not Japanese if you come to me with a Kensei and say, hey, I named my Kensei Lucas Schmeckeldorf. I'm going to say, that doesn't sound Japanese. Was that the intention? And if you say yes, okay. If you say no, I'm going to be like, then name him something Japanese. Like, that's all I can tell you. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.